What if everything you know about Sodom and Gomorrah is only the surface of a deeper, more disturbing truth? These weren't just sinful cities. They were warning signs from eternity, flashing red for every generation that dares to ignore the spiritual laws that govern the universe. And here's the twist. The same forces that brought fire from heaven are alive and active today, but dressed in modern clothes. We live in an age that celebrates pride, normalizes greed, glamorizes lust, justifies violence, and calls selfishness boundaries. But God doesn't forget. He doesn't overlook. And when limits are crossed, judgment comes, not to destroy for the sake of wrath, but to awaken those who still have ears to hear. This video is not about fear. It's about revelation. You're about to discover the 5 sins that turned paradise into ashes, and how their legacy could be influencing your life right now, without you even realizing. And no, this isn't a story of hopeless destruction. It's a roadmap for divine rescue. If you're tired of shallow messages, if your spirit is hungry for something real, raw, and redemptive, stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, you're going to see the Bible like you've never seen before. What if I told you the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't just about sin, but about a total rupture with the divine essence? It wasn't just a random punishment. It was a celestial response to 5 forces that, once rooted in the human heart, corrupt everything around them. The Bible is clear, but few perceive the true reason behind that fire from the heavens. These 5 sins aren't just historical. They're mirrors of our time. And when you look closely, you might see something in your own life. Now picture a society where pride rules, greed sets the tone, desire knows no limits, hospitality is trampled, and violence is routine. Doesn't that sound familiar? Yes, it could easily be today's news. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah isn't just an old Bible account. It's a disguised warning from the past. And honestly, it's almost frightening how well it fits into our current reality. The Bible says God came down to see with his own eyes. Think about that. The Creator interrupting the universe's flow to witness a city's moral decay. Doesn't that signal urgency? And here's what's even more striking. These cities were judged not only for their actions, but for what they had become. A culture of collective rebellion against everything sacred. Hold on to that thought, because what's coming next may change how you view divine judgment. These 5 sins, pride, greed, immorality, inhospitality, and violence, don't appear out of nowhere. They begin as small compromises. A selfish thought here, an immoral choice there, until, without noticing, a society forms where evil becomes the standard. And you may be asking, what does this have to do with me? Everything. Because those same poisons still seduce hearts today, in modern, subtle, smiling forms. That's why this story is more than condemnation. It's a mirror. A call to personal reflection. How many times have we ignored someone in need? How often do we silence our conscience for comfort? Here's where practice kicks in. Watch your thoughts, evaluate your priorities, and feed your spirit with prayer, Bible, study, and maybe even a spiritual journal. Small habits prevent great downfalls. And if this touched your heart, consider subscribing. Here, we walk together toward the truth that sets us free. But it's not over yet. What comes next might be the missing piece in your understanding. Because now we're going back in time, right to the ancient map where it all began, and discovering why these prosperous cities chose the road to ruin. What if I told you that the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah might still lie buried beneath the salt-crusted shores of the Dead Sea? That their story isn't just myth, but rooted in geography, history, and echoes through time. These weren't random cities. They were economic giants in the Canaanite region, seated by a land flowing with natural wealth. But here's the catch. Prosperity without principle becomes poison. And what comes next might shift the way you see the relationship between material success and spiritual decay. Located near what we now know as southern Israel or Jordan, these cities thrived on trade, agriculture, and resource extraction. Picture lush fields, livestock, merchants crossing ancient roads with spice and silver. Sounds like a blessing, right? But somewhere along the way, that blessing turned into a breeding ground for sins. In the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah are not condemned, for poverty, but for what they did with abundance. And that makes all the difference. We often think wealth fixes everything, but these cities prove otherwise. With abundance came pride, apathy, and corruption. A society wrapped in comfort can lose its moral compass faster than one battling hardship. That's why the story matters today. How often do we idolize success and forget integrity? How many chase the promise of more while starving their soul of what really matters? This is not just a story, it's a warning. Let's bring this home. Think of the modern cities buzzing with life, wealth, and ambition. Skyscrapers rising, luxury brands flooding the streets, influencers living curated lives online. Yet beneath the surface, anxiety, disconnection, spiritual emptiness. That's the same mask Sodom and Gomorrah wore. If we only measure life by what we have and not who we are, aren't we just repeating history? Hold that thought, because what's next might hit even closer to home. This background isn't just historical trivia. It's the soil where the 5 sins grew wild. They weren't born in chaos, but in comfort. In a culture where people had everything, except reverence. That's the subtle danger of prosperity. It can lull us into forgetting the source. And that's where daily disciplines like gratitude, simplicity, and service become spiritual survival tools. Prosperity is a test, and they failed it. Still with me? Good, because we're about to dig even deeper. And the next stop, one of the most dangerous yet common sins that corrupted these cities from the inside out. And it starts with just one look in the mirror: pride. Here's a truth that might sting a little. Pride isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers in the background of our thoughts, convincing us we don't need help, correction, or God. That's exactly what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible, in Ezekiel 16:49, says their downfall began with pride. Before the flames, before the sins multiplied, there was self-importance. And trust me, what we uncover next might reveal a prideful thread in your own story. In prosperous Sodom, people believed they were untouchable. Their wealth, comfort, and status created an illusion of invincibility. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Today, pride hides behind diplomas, job titles, social media followings. It says, "I've got this," even when the soul is quietly crumbling. That's the same pride that made Sodom deaf to divine warnings, and we often carry that same tone in our inner voice. Let me be real with you. Pride will always resist transformation. It tells us we're already enough, that change is for the broken, the weak, the uneducated. But spiritual growth starts with humility, acknowledging that we don't know it all, and we can't walk this path alone. One practical habit: start journaling your daily thoughts and prayers. You'll be surprised how often pride tries to take the pen. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to say, "I was wrong"? That's pride flexing. Whether in marriage, work, or friendships, the refusal to admit fault is a silent killer. Sodom and Gomorrah were filled with people who believed they were above reproach. No repentance, no correction. And that posture hardened their hearts. Pride builds walls where bridges should be. And eventually, those walls become graves. If you've felt distant from God lately, ask yourself, have I been trying to do life on my own strength? That question alone can break chains. The antidote to pride isn't self-hate, it's surrender. Begin each day by simply asking, "Lord, teach me today." That small phrase disarms the ego. It realigns your spirit. And if this is resonating with you, maybe it's time to walk lighter, with more grace. Still, that was only the beginning for Sodom. Pride opened the door. But what came next truly poisoned the soul of the city. Because when self-importance sets in, the next step is even darker: greed. And that's where we're heading next. Let me hit you with a thought. What if greed isn't just about money? What if it's about hoarding attention, validation, comfort, even time? In Sodom and Gomorrah, the people weren't poor. They were rich. And that was the problem. According to the Bible, they had more than enough but refused to share. They neglected the poor, hoarded their blessings, and built walls instead of tables. What comes next will make you rethink how you see abundance. In today's world, greed is often glamorized. We call it grind culture, hustle, or just being ambitious. But when our desire for more becomes a reason to ignore others, we're not building success, we're building Sodom. The people of those cities had every chance to help the needy around them. Yet, they chose comfort over compassion. Does that sound familiar in the age of selfies and gated communities? Greed numbs the heart. It convinces us that helping someone will cost us too much: time, money, convenience. But the truth? Every spiritual tradition, including the Bible, teaches that giving unlocks blessing. Want to fight greed? Start small. Donate clothes you don't use, give anonymously, or pay a stranger's coffee. Generosity isn't about the amount, it's about breaking the grip of selfishness. And that grip, it's subtle but strong. Here's the kicker. Greed never satisfies. The more we get, the more we want. That's the trap Sodom fell into. Their appetite for more consumed their empathy, and soon, the poor became invisible. That same spirit floats around today, making us scroll past suffering, change the channel, ignore the call to care. But you're here, reading this and that, means your heart still beats with purpose. So let me ask, what are you hoarding? Is it time, resources, love, forgiveness? Because whatever you hold too tightly might be the very thing God is asking you to release. And if this stirs something inside you, take action. Bless someone today, not for recognition, but as a rebellion against the spirit of Sodom. You'll feel lighter, freer, more alive. Still, the fall didn't stop at greed. That hunger for more twisted into something darker, more dangerous, and what came next shattered not just morals, but the very image of divine design. Stay with me. We're stepping into the depths of immorality next. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable, but also essential. What happened in Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't just rebellion, it was the distortion of something sacred. In Genesis 19:4-9, the Bible exposes a society where desire lost all boundaries. The people attempted to violate divine messengers. Think about that. Angels. That's how far they had fallen. This wasn't passion, it was perversion. And what comes next might make you question the line between freedom and chaos. Sexual immorality wasn't just tolerated in Sodom, it was celebrated. It became a culture. When the sacred becomes casual, when intimacy becomes transaction, the soul of a society fractures. Sound familiar? Today's world isn't far off. Porn is a click away. Relationships are disposable. Desire is worshipped while commitment is mocked. The same spirit that lived in Sodom whispers today through screens, songs, and trends. But let's be clear, this isn't about shame, it's about restoration. God's design for sexuality was never to oppress, but to protect, to honor, to unite. Immorality always promises pleasure, but delivers emptiness. So how do we guard our hearts today? Start by setting boundaries. What you watch, who you follow, what conversations you entertain. Holiness is countercultural, but it heals. We all carry wounds, regrets, or temptations in this area. And that's okay. You're not alone. That's why practices like confession, prayer, fasting, and surrounding yourself with people who pursue purity are crucial. These habits don't imprison you. They anchor you. They remind you that you are more than your impulses. Sodom fell because no one was willing to resist. But you can choose differently. Let me ask you something. Are there patterns in your life that feel small, but deep down, you know they're eroding your spirit? Lust grows silently. It numbs, then dominates. But God offers something greater. Redemption, healing, a clean slate. If this part of the message is hitting deep, don't look away. Look within. And if it's time for a reset, start today. Because what happened behind closed doors in Sodom soon spilled into the streets, and their next betrayal wasn't just against God, but against one of the most sacred duties of the ancient world. Stay close. What comes next will reveal how even hospitality became a battlefield. Here's something few people realize. In the ancient world, hospitality wasn't just a courtesy, it was sacred law. In Sodom and Gomorrah, this wasn't just broken, it was shattered. When strangers entered the city, they weren't welcomed, They were hunted. Imagine that. Instead of kindness, the people chose cruelty. And what happened next wasn't just immoral, it was a betrayal of heaven's code. Stay with me, because this flips the script on what we think is no big deal. In the Bible, offering shelter, food, and safety to travelers was an act of divine obedience. But the men of Sodom wanted to violate the very ones they should have protected. That's more than inhospitality. It's spiritual treason. Fast forward to today and ask yourself, how often do we turn our backs on those in need? How easy is it to avoid the homeless, ignore the newcomer, or ghost someone who reaches out? The same spirit lives on in subtler forms. Hospitality isn't just about opening your home, it's about opening your heart, making space for the hurting, the awkward, the unfamiliar. Sodom and Gomorrah failed because they stopped seeing others as sacred. That's the root of inhospitality, indifference. So here's a practice. Once a week, go out of your way to include someone. A kind text, a shared meal, a listening ear. These small acts push back against the culture of coldness. Let's be honest, hospitality is inconvenient. It slows you down, costs time, demands empathy, but that's exactly why it matters. When you make room for someone else, you reflect the heart of God. You say, you matter. In Sodom, no one wanted to be bothered. That mindset is deadly. A city or a soul that closes itself off from others is already decaying from within. Ask yourself, have I made my life so efficient that I've become unavailable? That question could expose more than you think. Because behind the closed doors of selfishness, isolation grows. And isolation is where compassion dies. If this speaks to you, let it move you. Hospitality is resistance, it's redemption, and it's needed now more than ever. Still, even that wasn't the final nail in Sodom's coffin. There was one last sin, one more shadow that engulfed the city. And it wasn't hidden. It was violent, aggressive, unrelenting. Get ready. Because next, we face the darkest face of rebellion, violence. Violence didn't just visit Sodom and Gomorrah, it lived there. It breathed through every street corner, fueled by pride, greed, lust, and inhospitality. By the time the angels arrived, cruelty had become common currency. Oppression was the system, aggression was the language. And here's the chilling part. It wasn't always with fists, it was with silence, indifference, and the absence of justice. What you'll see next might change how you define violence. When a society normalizes harm, whether physical, emotional, or systemic, it's already collapsing. The people of Sodom didn't just hurt strangers, they crushed the vulnerable. The poor, the weak, the foreigner, all suffered. And while today we might not burn cities, how often do we burn bridges? Spread hate online? Stay quiet in the face of injustice? That's modern violence. And it's just as dangerous. The Bible shows us that God's heart breaks over oppression. He hears the cry of the afflicted. And yet in Sodom, those cries went unanswered by the people who could help. That's why this topic hits deep, because it calls each of us to ask, when have I looked away? Whether in our families, workplaces, or churches, turning a blind eye makes us complicit. So here's a challenge. Speak up. Defend the weak. Be light where others fear to shine. Spiritual violence is real too. It happens when leaders manipulate faith for power, when people use scripture as a weapon instead of a guide. Sodom wasn't just violent in body, it was violent in spirit. That's why discernment, prayer, and wise community are vital. They protect your soul from being led astray by voices that sound holy but act cruel. Violence distorts truth, but truth, when lived with love, brings healing. Let's be practical. Who around you needs your courage? Maybe it's the bullied teen, the overworked single mom, the ignored elder. Standing up doesn't always mean standing tall. It sometimes means standing close, refusing to let someone suffer alone. If this moves you, act. Even a text, a meal, a moment of presence can dismantle a bit of darkness. And yet, even in the ruins, there was mercy, a spark of hope. because one man and his family chose a different path. And what God did next reveals everything about judgment and about grace. Don't miss this. We're about to witness divine justice in its most raw and redemptive form. What if judgment wasn't God's anger, but his integrity in action? That's exactly what the story of Sodom and Gomorrah forces us to confront. We often picture divine wrath as cold and cruel, but the Bible paints a deeper truth. God is just because he must be. He upholds moral order, not out of vengeance but out of love that refuses to let evil reign. And what comes next may challenge everything you thought you knew about justice. Lot's rescue is often overlooked, but it's the heart of the narrative. In a city drenched in sin, one man clung to righteousness. Was he perfect? Far from it. But he responded when God called, and that made all the difference. That's the beauty of divine mercy. It seeks the willing, not the flawless. And maybe today, you're being called to do the same. To step out, even when everything around you is burning down. Here's a thought. If God ignored evil, would he still be good? The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah isn't a contradiction, it's confirmation that holiness and corruption can't coexist forever. That tension exists today too. When you see injustice, when you feel the pull to compromise, remember, God still calls people to stand apart. Holiness is a response, not a performance. It starts with a yes. This reflection isn't about fear, it's about alignment. Every day we make choices, to build or destroy, to heal or harm, to listen or ignore. God's justice is not just about consequences, it's about calling us back. So ask yourself, where have I drifted? What parts of my life need realignment with God's heart? Begin there. A prayer, a fast, a pause to recalibrate your soul. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by the weight of the world or even your own past, hear this. Mercy is still available. It was available for Lot. It's available for you. The Bible shows a pattern. Judgment may fall, but grace always rises for the repentant. That's the theological paradox. God is both righteous and relentlessly kind. Let that truth settle deep. But we're not done yet. Because what happened in Sodom didn't stay in ancient times. The same forces, pride, greed, lust, and violence, echo into our world today. And in the final chapter, we'll explore what this ancient fire has to teach us in a modern world still playing with matches. Let's be honest, we've never lived in a world so advanced and so morally lost. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah isn't locked in the past. It's a prophecy playing out in real time. Just swap camels for cars, scrolls for smartphones, and you'll see. The 5 sins that doomed those cities are thriving in our own. Pride, greed, immorality, inhospitality, and violence. They didn't vanish. They evolved. And what comes next might make you rethink what's considered normal. Look around. Pride disguises itself as self-love. Greed wears the mask of ambition. Lust parades as liberation. Coldness hides behind boundaries. Violence now comes in pixels and policies. The same spiritual currents that drowned Sodom flow through our media, our politics, our communities, and yes, sometimes even our homes. That's why this message matters. It's not ancient history, it's current reality. But here's the light. Awareness is the first act of redemption. Once you recognize these sins, you're no longer a passive victim. You become a watchman. The Bible doesn't tell us Sodom's story to scare us, but to awaken us. So here's a practice. Journal each week where you see these forces trying to influence your decisions. Don't judge, just observe. Because change begins with clarity. And what about community? Lot wasn't saved alone. His family was rescued too. That shows us something powerful. Your spiritual choices impact others. You might be the one in your circle called to stand apart, to pray differently, to love radically. Don't underestimate the ripple effect of one surrendered life. Be salt, be light, be the contrast. If this feels overwhelming, breathe. God doesn't ask you to fix the world, only to stay faithful in it. Spiritual habits like prayer, scripture, Sabbath rest, and confession are more than rituals. They're resistance. They ground you. They cleanse your soul from the spiritual smog of a culture chasing shadows. And if this message brought clarity to your heart, maybe it's time to live louder for what matters. So now you know. The fall of Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't just about fire. It was about choices, patterns, and consequences that echo through time. And the invitation today is clear. Walk a different path. Not one of fear, but of wisdom. Not of condemnation, but of conviction. Because the same God who judged is the same God who saves, and that choice is yours. Now that you've seen the rise and fall of Sodom and Gomorrah through the lens of pride, greed, immorality, inhospitality, and violence, what will you do with it? Because this isn't just a Bible story. It's a mirror, a wake-up call, a divine interruption asking, where are you headed? God's judgment wasn't about destruction for destruction's sake. It was about justice, mercy, and calling his people back home. Maybe some of these sins hit close. Maybe you recognized patterns in yourself, your family, or the world around you, and that's okay. Recognition is the first spark of transformation. God doesn't shame you, he invites you to return, to realign, to rebuild. The same God who rained fire also reached down to rescue. That grace still burns bright. So here's the question. Which direction are you walking? Toward the patterns of Sodom or toward the path of life? What habits need to change? What voices need to be silenced? What relationships need healing? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your journey. We grow when we walk this out together. If this message opened your eyes or stirred something in your spirit, don't walk away unchanged. Reflect on it. Talk to God. Share it with someone who needs truth wrapped in love. And remember, your steps matter. Your choices echo. Your surrender could be someone else's rescue. And hey, if this kind of content feeds your soul, I invite you to subscribe and activate the notifications. Here we go deep, we seek truth, and we walk toward the light together. Thank you for being here. Now go, live different, live free.